Hi, my name is Laura Stinchfield, and I'm the pet psychic of thepetpsychic.com. And I thought today I would share with you some of my experiences with my own personal animals around death and what those experiences taught me. And so the first one that I can think about is in nursery school, we had this guinea pig. I don't remember the guinea pig's name. But of course, I loved the guinea pig, and it was my favorite part of nursery school. Well, one day I came in and I found out that this guinea pig had died, and I had no idea what died means. I had absolutely no idea. But I saw this guinea pig, and it had, no life. It was just lying there. And the teacher said, "Okay, let's go bury him." And I remember thinking, this is so odd. Like, he was running around yesterday and, like, now he's lifeless. And I just remember thinking, this is so strange. I don't remember crying, but I remember being, like, confused. And so we went to the playground, and there was, like, this giant slide that went down this hill. And, it might not be giant now, but it was a giant to me then. And we buried him under the slide. And I thought, this is so weird, that we're burying him under the slide. It didn't make sense to me at all. But one of the things that I think is absolutely amazing about it is that ever since then, my idea of death has been this like whoosh feeling. And that's because every time I slid down the slide, I thought of the guinea pig and death. And it's amazing to me now because sometimes the animals talk about that dying is like a whoosh feeling. So that was my first experience. My second experience was with our Yorkshire Terrier named Taffy, and I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. And she was my best friend. She went everywhere with me. I just absolutely loved this dog. And she's actually the first experience that I've ever remember hearing an animal. I remember my parents holding her over the crib and her looking at me and her saying, "You're so small," or that feeling of "you're so small." And so I remember her like being really sick and having diarrhea and like me being like, "Oh my gosh, like Taffy's not well." I actually even remember me feeling physically sick when she was sick. And then she died over the night. And my mom told me in the morning. And I didn't know what to do, And I just remember we had these like spinning around chairs. I just remember all I could do for like hours was spin around in that chair trying to hold back my tears. Like this vague recollection of her too as a spirit coming and sleeping with me. And that was the thing about me too, is that I've always seen spirits ever since I was really little. People spirits too. So I never thought it was strange, or I never was scared. Well, sometimes I was scared, but most of the time, I didn't think it was ever unusual that I saw spirits. I just thought everybody could, and it was a part of everyday life. Then my third experience was with my horse named Spot. He was this horse that I won my first ribbon on in a horse show. He was a lesson horse at the farm Boulderbrook Farm in Scarsdale, New York. And Spot was awesome. He was like the coolest horse, I thought. And nobody wanted to ride him because he was kind of more difficult. I mean, he was still a lesson horse, so he probably wasn't that difficult, but for kids. And I just loved him because he was kind of difficult. And I remember coming one day to the barn, and he was standing in the middle of this huge arena, and he was like dripping with like green snot, and I wanted to like go in there, and the doors were so heavy to open the arena door. I couldn't always open the arena doors, and I wanted to go in there really bad, and my nobody would let me. They were like, no, you can't go in there. Like, he needs to be quarantined. And he was just standing there. And I remember hearing him say to me, like, come here, you know? And so I waited till everyone disappeared. I jumped over and I jumped into the arena and I went over to him and I like hugged him and I felt how sick he was. And I remember the sense of like, I gotta go, like, I am so sick. And he was just like showing me like with all his heart like the pain that he was in and that he had to go, and he was like saying goodbye to me. It was so sad. And I was just like hugging him really tight, and then I think somebody came and saw me and told me to get out of there, and I like kissed him and he like looked me in the eyes and so sweet, said that he loved me. And so then my parents wouldn't let me watch, and and I had no idea, you know, what happens with euthanasia. Like, I've never heard of it. Like, it meant absolutely nothing to me. I was probably maybe 8 years old or 8 or 9 years old. And so afterwards, I wasn't able to see his body. They wouldn't let me see his body, but he got put in like a truck, and he was, we walked outside of the barn and this truck was pulling away, and my dad puts his arm around me and he's like, well, Jinx will be eating Spot next week. And Jinx was my dog, and I was like, what? Like, oh my God, they put horse meat in dog food. I mean, that was like a huge realization to me. And like, I don't know if Spot actually turned into dog food, but he might have. And it was my job to feed Jinx. I was like, oh my God. Every time I'd feed him, I'm thinking, am I feeding him horse meat? Am I feeding him Spot? My dad is actually really wonderful. He just didn't think. I don't think. Sorry, Dad. But that's okay. It was a good realization for me because it was like the first time I ever knew that. Okay, and then when Jinx passed away, he was like the greatest dog too. And he passed away on Christmas Day. That morning he was acting really strange. We had like an outdoor, like a tie out. And back then it didn't swivel. And so we're having Christmas breakfast, and I looked, and we had a baby gate from the kitchen because he was like pooping and peeing things. And I looked, and I saw Jinx. I swear to this day, I saw Jinx looking at me from the baby gate. And then my brother went to go pick up his girlfriend from the train station, and he started screaming. And Jinx had hung himself outside on Christmas morning on the tie out. But I could have sworn I saw him in the kitchen. And so I definitely saw his spirit. And so that night, you know, I was devastated. He was like my childhood dog. I was devastated. I wrote a letter to him and like how much I loved him and everything. And then I wrote a letter back from him. And I wish I had it now. I had it for a really long time, but I couldn't find it. But what was so amazing about that is that I know now that the letter back from him was really from him. Like, seriously from him. So that was like how I first was like learning how to communicate with animals. I was writing. I would write everything out. And so like I really believed I channeled Jinx that time. Then this other time is PJ, my bird, passed away. I was like 18, a senior in high school. And PJ was really, really sick. And he was old. He was like, I don't know how old he was. He was like 12 years old or something. Old for a parakeet. And he was also my best friend. He could sing Bob Marley songs. He was so cool. And he was sick where he was like lying on my pillow at night. He was that sick. So I heard this story. Somebody told me that they had like asked God for they'd ask God or like a higher power or something to come and take their loved one. I don't remember if it was for a person or for a pet. And then God came and took their loved one. And PJ was suffering so much, I couldn't stand it anymore. So I said, PJ, we're going to pray to God. Now, I had no idea if there was a God or anything. I mean, I had no idea really if there was a higher power. But I was like, I'm going to pray to God, and I'm going to, like, we're going to pray, and God is going to take you and bring you to heaven, to wherever that is, and there's going to be tons of reggae music there. and I told him I loved him, and I said goodbye. And then I went to a keto class, and then like I wanted to see if it worked, so I came home and snuck up the back steps so I didn't have to say hi to my mom and dad. And when I walked in the room, PJ was dead. And I was like, oh my God, like God took PJ for sure. I swear. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like, I really believed that something was out there. Something was, like something helped PJ out of his suffering because we asked it. I knew it for sure. And PJ he had this thing where whenever he'd hear me come home and I would get near the steps to come up the stairs, he would start like tweeting, and he would tweet his favorite song, or he would have this tweet like, hey, Laura, here I am. And I never had him in a cage. He had a cage, but he could get out, and then he would like fly on my shoulder. And I swear that since then, every time I came home, I could hear him tweeting. He was still tweeting for me. That sweet PJ. So, as you can see, like, I have all these experiences where I'm like, death is not really separate from us. Death is something that is, it's just crossing into another dimension. They're still around us, even though we can't see them. I'm sure of it. Oh, back to when Spot died, the horse. It was the first time I think I was ever depressed. Like, I remember I'd never really been depressed before. I mean, I'd been sad, but I was a pretty active kid, and I was a pretty happy kid, actually. And I remember, like, the day after Spot died, like, I couldn't do anything. I was, like, totally depressed, and I remember, like, watching TV, which I never did. I was totally an outside girl. And I remember my friend calling me up, Robbie, and he was like, do you want to play basketball? And I was like, no. And he was like, no? And I was like, no. I was like, but maybe my brother does. So I was like, Gran, you want to play basketball? He was like, sure. So Robbie came over, and he came up to me, and I'm like staring at the TV, and he's like, do you want to play basketball? I'm like, no. He's like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, whatever, And then I remember him and my brother playing basketball, and me like looking out the window at them playing basketball, and me going, it's so weird. Like, I don't want to play basketball. Like, what's wrong with me? So it was like the first depression. It was sad. And I actually have this recollection of like Spot coming to visit me too, but I don't really remember too much. I was like in my bedroom. I'm just thinking, like, what are you doing in my bedroom? You looked young and happy. It's such an old memory. It's fuzzy. Okay. Then there is Juliet. So Juliet was my cat that I got in college. And you might have heard other stories about her, about how she's like the first experience where I really felt like an animal heard me. Like, I was backpacking a lot and camping a lot, and I'd have a pet sitter come take care of her and everything, but every time I'd come home, she would wait for me on the front porch, she'd look at me, and then she would take off. And she would do this, she would disappear sometimes for days. And so I read in this book that if you picture the sun rising and setting for as many days as you're gone, like light to dark, light to dark. Like just picture the days, and then picture yourself happily coming home. That that the animal will get it, and they'll just know how long you're gone. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try that with Juliet. So I did that with her, and the next time I came home, she was sitting on the front porch. She came in the house with me, and that night she even slept with me. She was like kneading on my head, and she had never done that before. So it was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, there really is something to like visualizing, like really thinking about what you want to say to them and like visualizing it, and they get it. So Juliet was really about that. So Juliet like had this sort of like, I used to always say to her like, Julieta, she kind of looked like a ballerina. Like she was really dainty. She was like this beautiful, like light brown, orangey color, and she had like these cute little white paws, and she was very slender, and she was very wild cat-like in her movements. And I used to always say, Julieta, you should be a mountain lion, or Julieta, you should have been a wild cat. And she had a heart murmur, but so she would sometimes like go like stay out hunting at night, and I used to be like really freaked out about it because of coyotes and stuff. She was pretty smart and she could climb trees and everything, but I was really scared. So this one day she didn't come home at night, and I was like, where's Juliet? You know, and like normally I would have been like frantic, like looking around for her everywhere. And I kind of like looked for her a little bit, but I said to my boyfriend, I'm not that nervous. Like, I'm sure she's okay. But I was like calling her, but she wasn't coming. And so I was like, oh. So I went to bed, but I left the back door opened. And I had another cat, Joey, who's recently passed away last year. And Joey was like the worst hunter in the world. He had like a bum leg, and he just was like a terrible hunter. So I fell asleep, and I had this dream of Juliet. And Juliet came to me in the dream, and she said, Mom, I have to go. And I was like, what do you mean? She goes, Mom, I have to go. She said, a door opened, a window opened, and I took it. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, a window opened, and I took it, and I'm going to be a mountain lion cub. And then I saw her transform into a mountain lion cub. I'm still going to start to cry. It's so long ago. Sweet little thing. And I was like, no, Juliet. And she's like, Mom, I got to go. I'm going to be a mountain lion cub. So I woke up. And I said to my boyfriend, I had this terrible dream about Juliet that a mountain lion took her. But it wasn't really true. I had this dream that she became a mountain lion. And so I went outside like frantic. And there Joey is on the porch with a mouse. And he's catching the mouse, and he's like playing with it, and he's like running from one side of the porch to the other part of the porch. And I'm like, now Joey would never had this skill before ever. And I used to always say to him, like, Juliet, like he used to follow Juliet and like scare the mice away. Like he was so clumsy. But I swear to this day that Juliet taught Joey how to hunt that night in spirit. I know that she did. Know that she did. And that was Makia, you hear? Come here, Makia. So Juliet went to heaven to be a mountain lion. Then much later, I had an experience with a mountain lion who I think was Juliet, but that's a whole different other story. In the woods. Here's Makia. Makia, honey? Makia didn't know Juliet. She came after. Makia, honey, what do you want to say? You want to say something about all these stories? What do you want to say? What do you want to say? You believe in animals going to heaven, of course. You've known a lot of animals go to heaven. You know Joey and Boomer and Maya. When I've been to heaven. Do you want to tell the story of how you've been to heaven? Yeah, I came to heaven. You came to heaven? This is my animal talk voice. This is Makia in real time. I went to heaven because I had too much insulin in my body. That's right. And when I went to heaven, I realized that you should never be scared of your animals going to heaven. Oh, that's good. Why, what was it like there? It was like a beautiful day. It was like a beautiful day. And I love butterflies. And there were butterflies everywhere. There were? You never told me that. Yeah, I remember there was butterflies everywhere. Oh. Should we tell the story about how Lala had passed away? Makia was there when Lala passed away. So then there was Lala, who was my German Shepherd coyote dog, and there was this really awesome, amazing dog, and I had her. She was my first animal outside of my parents' house. She was my first dog I ever had by myself. And she went everywhere with me. She went camping with me. She went to classes in college with me. She went everywhere with me. And so one day I went to an animal communication workshop. And it was my first workshop. And I came home and I was practicing, and I said to Lala, how are you feeling? And she looked me straight in the eye and she said, Mom, I'm dying inside. And I said, what do you mean you're dying inside? And I said to my boyfriend, Lala says she's dying inside. He says, no way, there's no way that she's dying. That's ridiculous, there's no way she's dying. And I'm like, no, she literally said that she's dying inside. And he said, no, Laura, that can't be it. And it's true. Lala was amazing. She was like still backpacking with us. She was, hiking with me. I had a dog walking service at the time, and she was going on my dog walks with me. She was like doing really well. So 3 months later, she got really, really sick. And, she was sick for like 3 days, and she had blood transfusions, and it turned out that her blood wasn't clotting and that she was going to die. And she had cancer. And so then I had her at a specialist, and all these doctors, all these vets pulled me aside and they said, you need to euthanize her right now. It's inhumane if you don't. You need to euthanize her right now. And I looked at La, and all I could hear was that she wanted to go home. And I wasn't a professional animal communicator at the time. And I was very, very insecure at the time. I didn't really feel like I had a voice. I was very quiet, and I was really nervous about saying to all of these other people, these professionals, that I was going to take my dog home. But I was sitting with La in the kennel there, and I was like, La, do you really want to go home? And I felt like, I just want to go home. I just want to be home. And I thought back to like all these like self-help books, I was reading at the time, and like just all these, everything said like trust your intuition, and it just screamed at me. It just screamed, take her home, take her home, take her home. And I was like, I need to take her home. So I looked at the vets and I said, you know what? I gotta take her home. And they're like, you're making a big mistake. She's gonna be in a lot of pain. I said, I gotta take her home. Help me get her in the car. I'm taking her home. So I was leaving. This vet came over to me. She was actually vet tech at the time. She's now a surgeon at the place, but she was a vet tech at the time. She came over to me and she said to me, listen, if she doesn't go in the middle of the night tonight, and she's still alive in the morning, call me and I will come up and help you put her down. And I was like 45 minutes from the place. I couldn't believe that. And I was like, okay. So I stayed up with La all night. I called all these animal communicators, like frantic, like trying to find somebody that could talk to her, and I was fine with her myself. I didn't ever get in touch with anybody. But I was fine with her myself. And the next morning, the vet had to come up. Well, when she came, and there's 2 shots. She gave the shot where she falls asleep, And then she does the euthanasia shot. And as soon as she gave the euthanasia shot, I saw the most amazing thing. I saw Lala's spirit lift out of her body, and it looked like, it was like glittery, and it looked like, I say, aspen leaves blowing in the, aspen leaves like glittering, or like golden coins in a wishing well. I mean, it was so beautiful. And it wasn't like in dog form, it was just like air, like heat rising off a pavement, sort of. And then all of a sudden, I felt whoosh, like her fly through me. And it was the most amazing feeling I've ever felt in my whole life. To this day, I have not felt anything better than that. Nothing. So that was like, wow, like wherever they go, it is so unbelievable to me. It's so beautiful that I can't even, like, we can't even fathom really that feeling, because really there's nothing like that. When people say, oh, like sex, and I was like, better, serious, because it's like, it is just, like Makia said, like a beautiful day, like that actual feeling of being present on a beautiful day, and like everything being joyful and happy. It's even better than that. So that's why I was able to help so many people with their animals who have crossed, and their people who have crossed now too. So this is a good time to maybe like start talking about like the afterlife. I have other animals that have passed away after Lala, Joey Joe and my Joey Joe and my cat, Maya, my wolf dog, Boomer, my bunny, that's Ra, another bunny that passed away, a cockatiel, Francis Tulip, and then hundreds of clients, thousands of clients, animals, friends, animals. I mean, so many that have been close to me. But Maya, the wolf dog, is like a whole nother story, because she's a reincarnation, but that's a different video or different audio. That's a different story. But I will tell that story of Maya and her reincarnation one day. So what I know about the afterlife. Okay. So, okay, what do we tell our animals before they go? Like, how to prepare animals before they die. How will we know when our animals are ready to die? What you want to say to your animal to see if they're ready to die, you want to tell them, listen. You want to tell them everything you know about heaven, whatever your beliefs are, whatever heaven. I say call it heaven because that's just traditionally it's called heaven, but you can call it the afterlife. You can call it another dimension. You can call it anything you want. Like, I call it heaven just because I feel like it, but I'm not really stuck to that word. So just for all of you who don't like that word, or who wonder, is just another dimension, really. So what's important for your animals to know is what the afterlife is about. And if you can find a way, just like if you believe in heaven or the afterlife, if you can tell them what you believe, they'll get it, they'll understand it. Tell them it's okay to go. Tell them they'll see their friends, their animals that they've known on the other side, and they may even see your ancestors, or any people who have passed away that they have known or they may not have known. They will have company on the other side no matter what. They will be taken care of. You can tell them that, and then if you don't really know about what you believe, you can get children's books on heaven or on the afterlife and read that to them, or read them children's books about losing a pet, and that will help them also. And then you want to tell them that when it's time for them to go, to fly as high as they can go, because they have to fly through all these other dimensions, and you just want to tell them to fly as high as you can go. So and they'll get it. Just picture them flying, like you could say like a bird taking flight. And so like, how will you know if your animal is ready? Like I tell them, just tell me when you're ready. Like Maya with my wolf dog, I was like, I have to hear it 3 days in a row. She was always saying she wanted to go, and then she changed her mind. But Maya was unique. They're not all like that. So, but you want to say, I need you to look me in the eye, and I need you to tell me. Like some people say, like, I'll know when my animal stops eating, but like sometimes they eat until the day that they die. Sometimes they do, So you just say, look me in the eye, and just keep telling me over and over and over again, and I'll get it. And they will. They will look you in the eye and tell you over and over and over again. You want to ask the vet what to expect. Like, how are they going to proceed with the euthanasia if they need help? And because you want to know exactly like how many shots they're going to get, like what does it look like, what to expect. Have your vet explain that to you. When you're with your animal and they pass, I think it's really important just to take a moment and like breathe and think to yourself, just sort of be present and sort of allow yourself to experience what's ever in the surroundings. Because like how Lala flew through me, very often they try and touch you some way. Like sometimes people feel them rub up against them, or they think they see them, or they feel their feeling on their face, or they'll feel the wind blow a certain way. And many times during the euthanasia that's been outside, like the air will look a little bit crisper, or like the birds will get a little bit more intense. Like you'll be able to hear them more clear. Like it's almost like everything sort of has this beautiful tint to it. And I think that's really important to pay attention to. Though if you don't see that, don't worry. It's really hard, like through your grief. Sometimes it's hard just to see those things because you're grieving so much. But very often they are there, like watch for birds in the sky or sounds or the wind. The wind is a big one, Then it is my belief that the animals travel and they go to a different dimension, and the people too, and that they are in a place where they are rejuvenating. They're meeting old friends. Sometimes they're meeting our ancestors, and they're just in a place where they're resting. And I like to give them 3 days before I talk to them. But for you and your pet, you can talk to them during those 3 days. Like, they'll hear you, and they like being connected to you. They like being talked to. They just can't come closer and, touch you and, let you know that they're around, let you know necessarily that they're okay. That's not really set in stone. Sometimes you will have a visit from them during that time. But if you don't think anything of it, don't be worried. Oftentimes during those 3 days, they feel ripped from you. They feel so far away. And that's because they really are far away. And then after the 3 days, after they come closer, they can touch you in many, many ways. They can put a thought in your head. So they can come with a memory and put a memory of you with them in your head, and then wrap their spirit around you. And once they've wrapped that spirit around you, the intensity of them is so overwhelming that it often brings you to tears or to laughter if it's a funny memory. But a lot of times people misinterpret that as an intense longing for their loved one rather than a visit from their loved one. But you should know that is a visit from them. That definitely is. Later on, even our animals and our people on the other side can act as our intuition. They can put thoughts in our minds, and we can, about where to go or what job to go after, or, it could be all types of things, what foods you should eat. Some people say to me, oh my God, they can control you. They can control us. No, they're not going to control you. They're just going to give you ideas that might feel good to you, that might feel positive to you. So, the other thing that they can do is blow the wind. That's a big one. I love having wind chimes because they can blow the wind, and it's like on a quiet day, you'll hear the wind chimes. They can come in a hummingbird. They can come in dragonflies. They can come in signs from other animals. They can make you look up at a certain time to read a billboard or open up a magazine and see a wording that like answers your question. Deceased people can leave coins. Animals don't necessarily do that often, but people more leave like coins, like pennies and quarters and money. What else can they do? They can make lights flicker, like the lighting, like sunlight. They can bring the sunlight away from the like they can move the clouds away from the sun. All sorts of different things. They can, people mostly, not necessarily animals, but some animals probably can change like the station on the radio, or they can make a song come on the radio. I mean, it's pretty amazing what they can do. Everybody wants to have a dream of their pet or their loved one who's passed away. It's hard for them, and people should know that it's not the easiest thing for a spirit to do. Because what a spirit has to do in order for you to dream of them is they need to come into your unconscious, wipe your unconscious clean, place a dream in there that makes sense with them in it, wake you up, and so you remember it. Or they have to come into your unconscious, take an existing dream, put themselves in it, make it make sense, then wake you up so you remember it. It takes an extraordinary amount of energy for them, and it's not always easy. So if you don't get a dream from them, don't worry. Everybody gets it differently, and your loved one on the other side is going to experiment. They're going to be like, okay, I'm flickering lights. Like, are you getting it? No, they're not getting it. Okay, I'm giving you a smell. Are you getting it? Doesn't this smell like me? Remember how I liked roses? Do you smell the roses? No, I'm not getting spaghetti sauce. Remember how I made spaghetti sauce? That's for people. And people still don't get it. So if you start to say like, that's weird. That reminds me, or like, oh, my dog used to love dirty, slobbery tennis balls. Why do I keep finding dirty, slobbery tennis balls? If you notice, then the being on the other side is going to say, perfect. That is the way I can get a hold of them. And they're going to do it more. They're going to come back the same way. So really start to trust it and believe it and acknowledge it and say, oh yeah, hi, like for instance, sometimes when I'm lying in bed and I remember Joey, my cat, used to come and lie up on my head and wrap his little hand around my hand. He would like hold my hand. And so now sometimes he'll do that, like in spirit. I can feel him so strong. And I know how easy it is to be like, oh, that's just a memory, but it's not. It's not just a memory. It's really him. And so I acknowledge it and say, hi, Joey, how are you? I love you, like, it's so good to have you here. And, if you don't get words back, it's okay. But also you can feel it sometimes in your body, like, sometimes like I'll feel pressure, or I'll hear a ringing in my right ear, or like with people when they come, I'll get tingling on the right side of my arm, and then it will go to my left, and then it will go to my face. And you just sort of really start to pay attention to everything that you're thinking and everything that you're feeling. And the more you know yourself about how you think and feel at any given moment, you'll be able to recognize when something else pops in. So that's also really important, like sometimes when I get the chills, it's just, I'm cold. But sometimes I'm like, wait a second, it's like 90 degrees out, I'm not cold, and like, oh, that's so weird. It's always coming on my left arm, and oh, isn't that weird? I sense somebody now, or isn't that weird? I was just thinking about my dog. And I was just thinking about my dog when I got those chills. Or, so pay attention to what you're feeling in your body and what you're thinking and what you see, like any visions in your mind. What else? Oh, the amazing thing to me, and I'm like so amazed by this all the time, and it happens like all the time. Whenever I talk to beings on the other side, whether it be people or animals, but let's say I'm talking to animals, they talk about meeting people on the other side that are connected to us that they never knew in the life that they were with us. So, for instance, like dogs will often talk about like meeting a person's grandma or best friend that they knew long ago, or great grandpa, in heaven. And so our ancestors come for our animals because they love us, not necessarily because they knew our animal. They may not have known our animal, but they still come because they love us and they want to take care of our animal. And they get fed like meatballs and steak and like they eat there. And I know some religions say that spirits can't eat, but I'm telling you, a lot of spirits I know are eating there. Then what else? The other thing that the animals talk about, which I find like extraordinary, is that oftentimes they're with us in heaven. And they are like going for walks with us, they're hanging out on the couch with us, they're sleeping with us, they're just chilling with us in heaven. And I'm like, how can this be? And so I used to think, for a long time, that it was either like angels that were like pretending to be us to make our animals more comfortable, or that our loved ones could live in a memory as if it was real time, because time is so different there. I think they can still do this. They can do this. So they can be in a memory as if it's real time. But what I've found more from talking to some of the animals, and it actually comes up quite often, is that there's actually a part of us, we are always sort of connected to the other side. We have this spiritual side of us that, that our intuition comes from, this higher knowing. And I believe that there is a part of us on the other side or in another dimension. It's just an extension of us, really, that actually can be with our animal. And to me, it's so fascinating and confusing, but also very, very fascinating and very believable. Like, I believe it. And it's interesting, too, when I talk to clients on the phone, they can really feel it, too, a lot of the times, because it just feels so right. And so I think that's really important for us to know that, like, just because they're gone from us in this dimension doesn't mean they're not with us. And it's us, we miss them, but they can be with us at any given time. So they don't have the same experience. And, oftentimes my clients and, sometimes maybe even me, maybe in the past, not so much anymore, but my clients, they're like, it was just me and them. My dog or my cat didn't like other people, like didn't like other animals, like they're gonna be like alone in heaven. It's not true. Like whatever that part of them that like didn't want to be around other people or didn't want to be around other animals, that's changing in heaven. They're probably working on that, and that's another thing they can learn on the other side. They very often learn, like when Maya, my wolf dog, passed away, Serafina, my cat, would say, Maya's in the front yard practicing letting people walk by and not barking, and letting dogs walk by and not barking. And animals, aggressive dogs, all the time are telling me that they're in heaven practicing getting along with other dogs. Like one dog told me the other day that they're in heaven practicing getting along with other dogs. This is Lala, and that he would go and like try to bite the other dog in heaven, and his mouth would go through the spirit of the other dog, and the other dog wasn't hurt, of course, and then he would be like, oh, why would I do that? So he's like learning that you're not supposed to, that learning how to get along with other dogs. So they practice. Now, if there ever is a situation where an animal is like kind of like not distraught, but a little bit sad that they're away from us and they want to come back to us, they can come back. They very often reincarnate back into this life. That's a whole nother discussion, reincarnation. Maybe I'll do that next, but it's really fascinating, but they can make it back to us.